or we'd be much better if they stayed there. There's a lot of things that, that Australia can do. Just run through these very quickly. This is sort of Australian governments and things, and this has got impacts on our impact on the rest of the world. We can talk about it, Les Magoon, we can engage people, participatory democracy, the things that the government's trying to do with the 2020 summits is a really good example, how to get people involved. There's a whole range of perverse policies. Richard Dennis, who's here earlier, had produced a paper at our conference in 2003. There's fringe benefit tax, subsidies, tariff subsidies, four-wheel drives, all sorts of really silly things that increase things. In that, the perverse policies, Coles and Woolies give 4 cents a litre discount to the people who use the most petrol, and they take that from the grocery bills of the battlers. That's not sensible or fair. We should be encouraging frugal use of fuel and disadvantaging the profligate users, as we do to some extent with water. The fuel taxes should be raised to European levels or perhaps higher. We should do that perhaps by a smart card tradable allocation system, so people get an allocation. That might depend on where they live. If they're a long way from public transport, they get more. If they live right by a railway station, as I do, they get less. If they've got dodgy hips or arthritis or something, they have to drive their car, they get more. I can currently still ride my bike into town. And if they've got an important job, which I don't have, someone who's working as a shift worker, perhaps in maintenance, a big hospital, thing we consider important, those people should get more, and the allocation should be tradable. And this is useful for short-term oil shocks. We next have another sudden oil crisis, and for the longer term. The people side of the automobile dependence is much more important. The technological side is not very promising at all. I'm a scientist by training, but I have much more faith in the people side of it. As an example, individualised marketing, Travel Smart in Perth and in Brisbane got 12 or 13% reduction in car kilometres travelled over big areas, over 150,000 people in Perth now extended. You can reduce car travel by 12 or 13% just by providing people information, no coercion, no price signals, just providing them information, empowering them to make better decisions. And of course, if we're investing, Richard Dennis talked about the opportunity costs. If we invest in tunnels under Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane, then we can't put that money into railways and things. These are much better investments, and your super fund would be much safer if it was investing in those things rather than investing in tunnels. We should prioritise the remaining oil for all sorts of useful things. We can review the oil vulnerability at different levels. And at a national level, we can go to we should perhaps have an intergovernmental panel on climate change, perhaps as a subset of the IPCC, looking for a Kyoto-like protocol, contraction and convergence, so that everyone in the world gets a relatively equal amount of oil, rather than the current system where it's pretty unequitable. The US uses 4% of the world's 4% of the world's population use 25% of the world's oil. That's not terribly equitable. So if the US and Bangladesh all reduce a little bit, that's not going to be fair. And so the peak oil and impact on the MDGs, the developed world must show the part. And a Uniting Church about 10 years ago had a slogan about living simply so others may simply live. Australia, each of you in Australia on average is using 70 times as much as your counterparts in Bangladesh. And I learned a lot about population here, but I'm interested in car population, and the car population explosion is much worse and much more threatening in some ways. ASPO Australia is keen to suggest that firstly, awareness and engagement. These are policies for government, but for people in general. Awareness and engagement about peak oil, frugality, more efficiency in terms of cars or the way we use transport or whatever. And only lastly, alternative fuels. The previous federal government was mad keen on subsidising ethanol and things. We don't think there's much scope for that for a whole range of reasons. The NOAA analogy, we've got to start now. The cartoon, don't worry about the technology, will save you. I wouldn't like to be hanging for the cliff waiting for someone to set up a CRC and get the patents and write the papers and whatever the hell. And just mention that each of you individually could ask your superannuation fund about the oil vulnerability of your investments, and is going into toll roads and tunnels and airports and things. And perhaps just in conclusion, I could say from the things yesterday that the ecological footprint of car drivers in Europe and in the United States and Canada and here, the car drivers of Australian, the ecological footprint of car drivers in Australia are imprinted on the faces of the children in Iraq, and that's sad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. We've got 5 minutes. Lady right at the back over here. Yep. Right down the back there, Nick.
Thanks very much. My name's Susan Denham. Bruce, I was really impressed by that last list that you put up for us.
Can you speak up? I don't think people can hear.
Right, I was very impressed by the list of action options that you had up there for us. And I was trying to keep up with them all, but the first two... Ah, brilliant. Oh, good. It was just fantastic. And the first two talk about it and people should engage in participatory democracy, seem to be a common thread through so much of what we've heard yesterday and today, and that is the need for. My question to you is based on the principle, shall we say, business influence as opposed to citizenry influence that's been allowed for the last, we could argue, I suppose, 100 years, to influence absolutely every section of our lives. If we look at the funding to universities, perhaps that would equate with some of the ridiculous proposals for the future costs of oil, $15 a barrel and 35 by particular academics, rather than just they acted in complete error of judgment. But where the business is lobbying government, it's providing funds to what should be independent researchers, and particularly in the area of oil. How can we possibly expect true participatory democracy? And do you think perhaps there could be a key answer in a complete change of our education system to include not just the right to the 3 R's, reading, writing and arithmetic, but that there should be another 2 R's, that is rights and responsibilities of citizens?
Okay. I think we've got the question. There's 2 or 3 questions there.
Just briefly, to answer most of it, I don't really know. The participatory democracy has been used in Perth by the West Australian government, a dialogue with the city about city planning, all sorts of citizen juries and things, so it works very well. There are problems with it. I'm particularly encouraged that the Rudd government has got a 2020 thing, that we can use participatory democracy. The community cabinet meetings that the Rudd government's having, I went to one in Perth, that people have the opportunity to go there and we can try and raise our voices. Just that I'd suggest everyone should be putting in submissions to the 2020 summit. It's on the web page. You can put in things saying you think that peak oil, for instance, or climate change population should be on the agenda. So the mechanisms are there, and if we don't take advantage of the participatory democracy mechanisms are there, then it's a bit sad. We can't just blame the evil multinationals and things. We've got to do our bit too. But yeah, it's a bit of a battle.
Bruce, thanks very much for the graph.
Gets questions.
What I've felt, listening to Richard earlier, listening to you, it seems like in a democracy, 1/3 people say yes, 1/3 say no, 1/3 decided. So who is going to decide, number one? Number two, just simple. In America, 25% production by 4% people. Those who can do, they talk. In countries like I'm from India, I have been there for the last 2 years, people don't care. They have reached that stage, they say we consume less, we keep on consuming, we have to get our economy 10% GDP. Where do we go now?
Well, there's lots of ways we can do. The travel smart things, there's a whole range of things we can do, but certainly, you know, in a lot of our lifetime we've seen big changes to race relations, to smoking, to gender equity, all sorts of things. So to say that that everyone's wedded to their cars and we'll do that. My quality of life is better because I never had a company car or a salary package car, so I'm fitter now than I would be if I'd been driving to work in a BMW, you know, yelling obscenities through the windows at the other people who are holding me up. You can just ride your bike there and smile. It's not, yeah, there's a range of questions, a range of things we can do, and you know, we live in a democracy. We can vote with our own feet, and we can go to Coles and Woolies and say, I want 4% discount, not 4 cents in a litre, and if enough people did that, then Coles and Woolies would turn around. A whole range of things we can do, and lots of encouraging things. Thank you.